The message arrived on a Tuesday morning while humanity was arguing about mining rights on Europa. Ambassador Rodriguez had just finished his morning coffee when the holographic display flickered to life in the United Nations building. The being that appeared was tall, blue-skinned, and spoke with the kind of authority that came from ruling galaxies. "Primitive species of the third planet," the alien said, its voice carrying across every communication channel on Earth simultaneously. "You have been judged by the Galactic Council. Your barbaric nature and violent history make you unsuitable for civilized space. You will surrender your colonies and return to your birth world or face extinction." The transmission lasted exactly 3 minutes. When it ended, every government on Earth was in emergency session. The alien had identified itself as War Commander Vorth of the Deltarian Empire, speaking for something called the Hegemony. According to the message, humanity had 72 hours to comply. President Rivera watched the recording for the 5th time in her secure bunker beneath Washington. The alien's words were clear enough, but the implications were staggering. Humanity had been exploring space for barely 2 centuries. Their farthest colonies were only 30 light-years from Earth. How had they attracted the attention of an interstellar empire? "They've been watching us," General Morrison said, studying the tactical display. "Our expansion into the Kepler system must have triggered some kind of warning system." Dr. Williams, the head of xenobiology, shook her head. "The language patterns suggest they've been observing us for decades. They know about our wars, our history. They're not just afraid of our expansion, they're afraid of what we might become." The first attacks came 18 hours early. The mining colony on Kepler 442b went silent at 0347 Earth Standard Time. The asteroid mining station's in. The Vol 359 system followed 6 hours later. By the time the emergency broadcast reached Earth, 3 human worlds had simply vanished from the communication grid. Admiral Torres received the distress signals while reviewing defensive positions around Mars. The messages were brief and terrifying. "Unknown ships and system. They're not responding to communications. They're firing on civilian targets. Request immediate assistance. This is Colony Alpha 7. We are under attack by..." The transmission cut to static. The Hegemony fleet entered the Sol system like a storm front, their massive ships blocking out entire star fields. Intelligence estimates put their numbers at over 3,000 vessels, each one larger than humanity's biggest battleships. The lead ship alone was the size of Manhattan, its hull gleaming with energy shields that could deflect anything in the human arsenal. War Commander Vorth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the primitive human world grow larger on his tactical display. His species had conquered 47 worlds over the past millennium. This would be 48. The humans had shown promise in their early space exploration, but promise meant nothing without the wisdom to use it properly. "Analysis of human defensive capabilities?" Vorth asked his tactical officer, Minimal Commander. "They possess basic energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. Their largest ships are barely 300 meters long. Our shields can absorb their entire arsenal without strain." Vorth nodded. The Hegemony had made this decision for good reason. Humanity's expansion rate was alarming, but more concerning was their history. The species had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing each other. They had developed nuclear weapons within decades of achieving flight. They had fought wars that claimed millions of lives over resources that could have been shared. "Begin the cleansing operation," Vorth ordered. "Target their defensive installations first. Leave the civilian population centers for last. Let them see what resistance brings." The first wave of Hegemony ships moved toward Earth's orbital defenses. The humans had managed to build a modest network of weapon platforms around their homeworld. But against the Hegemony's superior technology, they might as well have been throwing rocks. But as the alien fleet closed in, something unexpected happened. The asteroid belt, which had appeared empty on long-range scans, suddenly erupted with activity. Hidden installations revealed themselves, rising from hollowed-out rocks like mechanical flowers blooming in the void. Mining platforms transformed into weapon emplacements. Cargo haulers dropped their disguises and became warships. The first human salvo caught the hegemony completely off guard. Instead of the expected energy beams, the humans fired something else entirely. Massive chunks of metal accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, tore through the alien formation like bullets through paper. The hegemony's energy shields, designed to deflect plasma and laser weapons, were useless against simple kinetic projectiles. Admiral Torres watched from the command center on Luna as the first hegemony ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. All stations, this is Luna Command. Commence Operation Broken Arrow. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth. The battle that followed would be remembered as the 47-minute war. The hegemony had expected to face a primitive species with basic weapons and no real military doctrine. Instead, they found an enemy that had spent centuries perfecting the art of destruction. Every human weapon was designed with one purpose: to kill as efficiently as possible. The humans used the asteroid belt like a fortress, their ships darting between the rocks while massive railguns fired salvos that could punch through the hulls of hegemony dreadnoughts. When the aliens tried to adapt, the humans changed tactics. Mining charges became improvised explosives. Cargo containers became kinetic missiles. Even the construction mechs were turned into weapons, their industrial lasers cutting through alien armor like tissue paper. War Commander Vorth watched in growing horror as his fleet was torn apart by an enemy that fought like no civilized species ever had. The humans didn't just target military vessels, they aimed for life support systems, command centers, anything that would maximize casualties. They fought with a viciousness that defied every convention of galactic warfare. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking, "we've lost 37% of our fleet. The humans are using weapons we've never encountered. They're not following any recognized combat protocols." Vorth stared at the tactical display, watching as another of his ships was torn apart by a human kinetic weapon. The primitive species wasn't just fighting back, they were winning. "Signal the retreat. We need to regroup and reassess our strategy." As the surviving hegemony ships fled the Sol system, they left behind a field of debris that would orbit Earth for decades. The humans had lost 6 ships and 200 crew members. The hegemony had lost over 1,000 vessels and nearly 1,000,000 soldiers. The message that War Commander Vorth sent back to the hegemony, High Command, was simple: the humans fight like demons possessed. We have awakened something that should have remained sleeping. Recommend immediate reinforcement. Of all border worlds, the species is not what we expected. President Rivera stood on the observation deck of Luna Command, watching the wreckage of the alien fleet drift past the moon. The attack had been intended as a quick extermination. Instead, it had become humanity's introduction to galactic warfare. The aliens had wanted to judge humanity's worthiness for space. Now they would learn what humans were truly capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction. The factory floors of Detroit had been silent for 3 days. Workers stood in long lines outside the Ford manufacturing plant, not for jobs, but for war assignments. The government had enacted the Emergency Production Act within hours of the alien attack, and now every industrial facility on Earth was being converted for military use. Maria Santos had been building hover cars just a week ago. Now she stood before an assembly line that stretched for half a mile, watching robotic arms install weapon systems into what had once been civilian transport vessels. The transformation was happening everywhere. Automobile factories were building armor plating. Electronics manufacturers were producing targeting systems. Even the food processing plants had been converted to produce military rations. Efficiency. Reports from all sectors, President Rivera demanded during the morning briefing. The war room beneath the White House had become the nerve center of human civilization. Representatives from every nation sat around the holographic display, their previous conflicts forgotten in the face of extinction. General Morrison pulled up the production statistics. "We're exceeding all projections. The shipyards on Luna are producing 1 frigate every 18 hours. The Mars facilities are working around the clock on heavy cruisers. We'll have a fleet of 3,000 ships within 6 months. Dr. Williams interrupted from her position at the science station. The alien debris from the Sol System battle has been invaluable. We've identified 17 different technologies that we can reverse engineer. Their shield generators, their faster-than-light communications, their energy weapons, we can adapt all of it, Rivera nodded grimly. The hegemony's mistake had been leaving their wreckage behind. Every destroyed alien ship was a treasure trove of advanced technology. Human engineers were working 20-hour shifts to understand and improve upon systems that had taken the aliens centuries to develop, Commander Blake received his orders while overseeing the construction of the newest human warship. The UES Defiance was barely 3 weeks old, but it already incorporated alien technology that made it more powerful than anything humanity had built before. Its hull was reinforced with materials reverse-engineered from hegemony armor. Its weapon systems combined human kinetic projectiles with alien energy manipulation. Your mission is simple, Admiral Torres explained over the secure channel. Take the Fifth Fleet into hegemony space. Find their supply lines and destroy them. Show them that Earth is not defenseless. The human fleet that jumped into the Proxima Centauri system was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Where other species built their ships for durability and long-term operation, humans had designed theirs for maximum destruction. Every vessel was armed with enough firepower to level a small moon. Their hulls were covered in ablative armor that could absorb tremendous damage while keeping the crew alive long enough to complete their mission. The hegemony outpost at Proxima IV had been considered impregnable. 3 defensive platforms surrounded the colony world, each one armed with weapons that could destroy a fleet. The station commander, a Deltarian named Korth, had received warnings about human aggression but dismissed them as fear-mongering, unknown. Vessels approaching the system, his tactical officer reported. Configuration matches the reports from the Sol System engagement. Korth studied the display with growing concern. The human ships were smaller than typical hegemony vessels, but there were dozens of them. They moved with a precision that suggested advanced tactical coordination. More disturbing was their approach pattern. They weren't following any recognized formation. Transmit standard warnings, Korth ordered. If they continue to approach, we'll demonstrate the futility of challenging the hegemony. The human response was immediate and terrifying. Instead of slowing down or changing course, the entire fleet accelerated directly toward the defensive platforms. Their weapons began firing while they were still at maximum range, filling space with a storm of kinetic projectiles and energy beams. Commander Blake watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Defiance. The hegemony's defensive strategy was sophisticated but predictable. They relied on their superior shields and weapons to hold off attackers at long range. Humans had developed a different approach: get close enough to make shields irrelevant, then unleash everything they had. All ships, initiate close-quarters combat protocol, Blake ordered. Remember, we're not here to win a fair fight. We're here to win. The human fleet split into 3 groups, each one targeting a different defensive platform. But instead of engaging in traditional ship-to-ship combat, they did something that horrified the hegemony defenders. The humans began ramming their damaged vessels into the alien structures, using their ships as missiles. The first human ship to impact a hegemony platform was the frigate Redemption. Her hull had been breached by enemy fire, and her crew was already evacuating. But instead of retreating, her captain aimed the ship directly at the platform's reactor core and engaged the engines at full power. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. Korth watched in disbelief as the humans sacrificed ship after ship to destroy his defenses. They're not fighting like any civilized species. They're using their own vessels as weapons. This is madness. But the madness was effective. Within 2 hours, all 3 defensive platforms were destroyed. The human fleet, reduced to half its original size, moved on to the colony world itself. The bombardment that followed was systematic and merciless. Industrial facilities, military installations, even the spaceports were targeted and destroyed. The survivors of the Proxima IV colony would later testify about the human assault. The attacking fleet had followed no recognized rules of engagement. They had targeted civilian infrastructure, contaminated the water supply, and left behind automated weapons that would kill anyone who tried to rebuild, War Commander Vorth received. The reports from Proxima 4 with growing dread. The humans weren't just winning battles, they were changing the nature of warfare itself. Every engagement followed the same pattern. The humans would accept massive casualties to get close to their targets, then use suicide attacks to maximize damage. They embrace death as a weapon, Vorth reported to the Hegemony High Command. Our tactics are useless against an enemy that considers their own lives expendable. We need to reassess our entire military doctrine. The Hegemony's response was swift and decisive. Fleet Admiral Zeth, the supreme commander of Hegemony forces, ordered a massive mobilization. Every available ship was to be deployed to human space. The primitive species would be crushed through overwhelming force, but the humans had anticipated this response. Intelligence reports from captured Hegemony personnel had revealed the location of major enemy fleet bases. While the aliens were gathering their forces for a decisive battle, human strike teams were already moving against their supply lines. The attack on the Vega system caught the Hegemony completely off guard. The humans had loaded cargo ships with antimatter warheads, then piloted them directly into the enemy fleet base. The explosion destroyed not just the facility, but 17 fully loaded battleships and their crews. Dr. Williams stood before the United Nations Emergency Assembly, her voice carrying to every corner of the planet. The aliens made a fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. They saw our history of warfare and assumed we were simply violent. They failed to understand that we are adaptive. Every conflict we fought has taught us something new about survival. The transformation of human society was complete. The species that had once debated the ethics of warfare had embraced it with terrifying efficiency. Factory workers built weapons with the same dedication they had once shown to consumer goods. Scientists who had studied the stars now devoted their efforts to developing new methods of destruction. Even children were being taught basic military tactics in school. Commander Blake returned to Earth after 6 months of raids into Hegemony space. His fleet had been reduced to a dozen ships, but they had destroyed over 50 enemy installations. The cost in human lives had been enormous, but the message was clear: humanity would not go quietly into extinction. The enemy is adapting to our tactics, Blake reported to the Joint Chiefs. They're reinforcing their defenses, changing their patrol patterns. But they're also afraid. Every report mentions human savagery and unconventional warfare. They're not used to fighting an enemy that refuses to follow the rules. President Rivera listened to the reports with mixed emotions. Humanity was winning the war, but at a cost that would have been unthinkable just months before. The species that had once dreamed of peaceful exploration among the stars had become something else entirely, a race of warriors who viewed death as just another tool in their arsenal. The war machine that humanity had built was running at full capacity. Every day brought new ships, new weapons, new tactics designed to exploit the enemy's weaknesses. The Hegemony had awakened something that had been sleeping in the human soul, the capacity for total warfare without mercy or restraint. As the reports came in from across the galaxy, one thing became clear: the aliens had made a terrible mistake. They had judged humanity by their past conflicts and found them wanting. Now they would learn what humans could accomplish when their very survival was at stake. The laboratory on Europa had been working for 6 months without interruption. Dr. Peterson stood before a collection of alien artifacts that would have been impossible to imagine just a year ago. Hegemony weapons, shield generators, faster than light, communication devices, all of them torn from the wreckage of enemy ships and now being dissected by human scientists. The breakthrough came from studying their power cores, Peterson explained to the assembled team. The aliens use a quantum fusion process that's incredibly efficient, but it has a fatal flaw. The containment field can be disrupted by a specific frequency of electromagnetic pulse. The implications were staggering. Every Hegemony ship, every space station, every defensive platform used the same basic power system. If humans could exploit this weakness, the entire enemy fleet could be vulnerable to a single type of weapon. Lieutenant Commander Stone received the new weapon specifications. While preparing for the assault on Volf 359, the Hegemony had built a massive fortress there, convinced that its position would allow them to control human expansion into the outer systems. The base was protected by energy shields that could deflect anything in the human arsenal. At least anything they had used before. "These are the new EMP torpedoes," Stone explained to her squadron leaders. "They're designed to disrupt alien power systems. One successful hit should disable their shields long enough for our kinetic weapons to finish the job." The human fleet that approached Volf 359 was different from the desperate forces that had fought at Proxima 4. These ships were newer, better armed, and crewed by veterans who had learned to fight the Hegemony on their own terms. More importantly, they were equipped with weapons designed specifically to exploit alien weaknesses. War Commander Vorth watched the approaching human fleet with growing unease. Intelligence reports suggested the humans had developed new tactical doctrines, but the exact nature of these changes remained unclear. What was certain was that every engagement with the primitive species had ended badly for the Hegemony. "Deploy the defense grid," Vorth ordered. "All ships to battle stations. We will not allow the humans to penetrate our defenses." The Volf 359 fortress was a masterpiece of Hegemony engineering. Its shields could absorb the firepower of an entire fleet. Its weapons could target and destroy ships at ranges that made human weapons useless. The base had been designed to be impregnable, a demonstration of Hegemony superiority that would break human morale once and for all. But the humans who approached Volf 359 were not the same species that had fought desperately to defend Earth. These warriors had learned from every defeat, adapted to every new challenge. They had studied their enemies with the same intensity that their ancestors had once reserved for survival in hostile environments. Commander Stone gave the order when her fleet was still at maximum range. "All ships, fire EMP torpedoes. Target their power distribution networks." The new weapons were invisible to Hegemony sensors, designed to mimic the electromagnetic signature of cosmic background radiation. They passed through the alien shields without triggering any defensive systems. Only when they reached the fortress's power core did they activate, sending precisely tuned electromagnetic pulses through the entire structure. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The fortress's shields flickered and died. Its weapon systems went offline. Emergency lighting failed throughout the structure, leaving thousands of alien personnel in complete darkness. The impregnable defense had been reduced to a helpless target in seconds. "All ships, commence bombardment," Stone ordered. "Remember, we're not here to capture territory. We're here to send a message." The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Kinetic projectiles tore through the fortress's hull. Energy weapons carved through bulkheads and corridors. The structure that had taken 3 years to build was reduced to scrap metal in less than an hour, but the humans weren't finished. Stone had learned from previous engagements that the Hegemony would try to rebuild any facility that wasn't completely destroyed. The solution was simple: make rebuilding impossible. "Deploy the nanobots," Stone ordered. "Contaminate the entire debris field." The microscopic machines that spread through the wreckage were designed for one purpose: to prevent any form of reconstruction. They would consume any attempt to repair the facility, turning the very atoms of the structure into components for additional nanobots. The Volf 359 system would remain uninhabitable for decades. The destruction of the Volf 359 fortress sent shockwaves through the entire Hegemony. The primitive humans had not only penetrated their defenses, but had done so with weapons that rendered their most advanced technology useless. More disturbing was the systematic nature of the attack. The humans weren't just winning battles, they were making entire systems unusable. Fleet Admiral Zeth convened an emergency session of the Hegemony High Command. Representatives from all 12 member species gathered in the Great Hall on the capital world of Nexus Prime, their faces reflecting the growing panic that was spreading through their territories. "The humans have developed weapons we don't understand," Zeth reported. "They're not just defeating our forces, they're making our technology obsolete. Every engagement reveals new capabilities, new tactics that we're not prepared for." The Deltarian representative, General Cross, stood to address the assembly. "Our intelligence suggests the humans are reverse engineering our own technology and improving upon it. They're taking systems that required centuries to develop and perfecting them within months." The revelation was shocking. The hegemony had always maintained technological superiority through careful research and development. The idea that a primitive species could match their advances in such a short time was almost inconceivable. Dr. Williams worked tirelessly in her laboratory on Luna, surrounded by the components of captured alien technology. The hegemony's mistake had been assuming that their science was too advanced for humans to understand. Instead, human researchers had found ways to improve upon alien designs, creating hybrid technologies that were superior to anything either species had developed alone. "The quantum communication system is the key," Williams explained to her team. "The aliens use it to coordinate their fleets across vast distances. But we found a way to intercept and decode their transmissions. We can predict their movements hours before they make them." The intelligence advantage was devastating. Human fleets began appearing at hegemony positions before the aliens had even finished deploying their forces. Supply convoys were ambushed in systems that should have been secure. The hegemony's carefully planned military campaigns were being disrupted by an enemy that seemed to know their every move. Commander Blake led the assault on the Rigel system with perfect timing. His fleet jumped into the system just as a hegemony supply convoy was transferring resources to the local garrison. The aliens had no time to prepare defenses or call for reinforcements. "This is how we win," Blake explained to his officers. "We don't fight fair fights anymore. We pick our battles, hit them when they're vulnerable, and disappear before they can respond." The battle for Rigel lasted exactly 27 minutes. The human fleet destroyed 3 supply ships, 2 escort vessels, and the orbital supply depot before jumping back to hyperspace. The hegemony garrison was left without the resources needed to maintain their position, forcing them to abandon the system entirely. Similar attacks were happening across the galaxy. Human strike teams had identified the hegemony's logistical weaknesses and were systematically exploiting them. The aliens found themselves fighting a war on hundreds of fronts simultaneously. Their forces stretched thin trying to protect supply lines that humans could strike at will. War Commander Vorth stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying reports from across the hegemony. In the past month, his forces had lost 37 supply convoys, 14 minor bases, and 2 major fleet installations. The humans were no longer the desperate defenders they had been at the beginning of the war. "They're not fighting like any civilized species," Vorth reported to Fleet Admiral Zeth. "They target our weaknesses with surgical precision. They've turned our own technology against us. This is not the primitive species we encountered at Earth. The transformation was complete. Humanity had evolved from desperate survivors into apex predators. They had learned to fight the hegemony's war better than the aliens themselves. Every captured ship, every piece of technology, every tactical innovation had been absorbed and improved upon." President Rivera addressed the United Nations for the first time since the war began. "The aliens came to our system believing they were hunting prey. They have discovered that they were wrong. We are not the weak species they expected to find. We are humanity, and we have shown them what that means." The reports from across the galaxy told the same story. Human forces were winning not through superior numbers or technology, but through adaptability and ruthless efficiency. They had taken the hegemony's greatest strengths and turned them into weaknesses. Dr. Peterson's final breakthrough came from studying the aliens' faster-than-light travel system. The hegemony used a network of quantum tunnels to move their fleets instantly across vast distances. But humans had found a way to collapse these. tunnels, trapping enemy fleets in normal space where they could be hunted down and destroyed. "We're not just fighting a war anymore," Peterson explained to the assembled scientists. "We're rewriting the rules of galactic warfare." The hegemony built their empire on technological superiority. "We're showing them that adaptability is more powerful than any weapon." The tide had turned completely. The species that had once trembled before alien technology now made that technology obsolete within months of encountering it. The hegemony had awakened something in humanity that they were completely unprepared to face. The capacity for unlimited adaptation in the service of survival. The refugee camps on Kepler 186f stretched beyond the horizon. Hundreds of thousands of hegemony civilians huddled in temporary shelters, their faces bearing the hollow look of people who had lost everything. These were the survivors of the human campaign of systematic destruction, beings who had once ruled the galaxy now reduced to begging for basic supplies. General Park walked through the camp with her aide, observing the aliens who had once considered humanity beneath their notice. The Deltarians sat in small groups, their blue skin pale with malnutrition. The Andromedans, tall and graceful, moved with the careful precision of people who had learned to expect violence at any moment. "The psychological impact reports are conclusive," Dr. Martinez explained as they toured the facilities. "The hegemony species are experiencing trauma on a scale we've never documented. They're not just afraid of losing the war, they're afraid of what humans have become." The transformation had been deliberate and systematic. After the success at Volf 359, human military doctrine had evolved beyond simple tactical superiority. The new strategy was designed to break the enemy's will to fight by making their very existence a form of suffering. Operation Scorched Galaxy had been President Rivera's most controversial decision. The plan was simple in its brutality. If the hegemony wanted to exterminate humanity, then humans would make the galaxy uninhabitable for everyone. Every world that supported the enemy war effort would be rendered useless. Every resource that sustained their civilization would be contaminated or destroyed. Commander West received her orders while stationed at the captured hegemony base on Tau Ceti. The facility had been one of the aliens' most important research centers, dedicated to developing new weapons for the war against humanity. Now it served as a human-forward operating base, its laboratories converted to produce the tools of galactic warfare. "Your target is the Andromeda Prime system," Admiral Torres explained over the secure channel. "Intelligence indicates they're using the agricultural worlds there to feed their core populations. Destroy the food production infrastructure and contaminate the soil. Make sure nothing can grow there for at least 50 years. The mission was typical of the new human approach to warfare. Instead of targeting military installations, they went after the foundation of enemy civilization. Food production, water, purification, atmospheric processors, anything that made life possible for the hegemony became a legitimate target. The human fleet that approached Andromeda Prime was smaller than the massive armadas that had fought the early battles of the war. These ships were specialized for a different kind of combat, the systematic destruction of an entire world's ability to sustain life. The agricultural world of Andromeda Prime 4 had been peaceful for over 1,000 years. Its inhabitants were farmers and food processors, civilians who had never imagined that their world would become a battlefield. The Planetary Defense Force consisted of a few outdated patrol ships and a handful of orbital platforms designed to deter pirates. Not military fleets. Commander West studied the planet from her flagship's observation deck. The world was beautiful in its simplicity, vast continents covered with carefully tended fields, cities that existed solely to support agricultural production, orbital stations that processed and shipped food to 100 different worlds. "Begin the sterilization protocol," West ordered. "Remember, we're not here to conquer this world. We're here to make sure it can never support life again." The human attack began with the deployment of atmospheric processors in reverse. Instead of making worlds habitable, these devices released specially engineered bacteria that would consume the organic compounds in the soil. The bacteria were designed to reproduce rapidly, spreading across entire continents within days. The Andromedan farmers watched in horror as their crops withered and died. The soil that had supported agriculture for millennia turned black and sterile. The very air began to smell of decay as the bacteria consumed everything organic they encountered. But the humans weren't finished. The second phase of the attack involved the systematic destruction of the planet's water supply. Orbital bombardment targeted the major reservoirs, while specialized chemical weapons contaminated the groundwater. Within weeks, the world that had fed billions of beings became uninhabitable. The few survivors who managed to escape. Andromeda Prime 4 brought with them stories that spread terror throughout the hegemony. The humans hadn't just destroyed their world, they had made it impossible for any life to exist there. The planet that had once been a garden was now a monument to human ruthlessness. War Commander Vorth received the reports from Andromeda Prime with growing despair. The humans had crossed a line that no civilized species had ever approached. They weren't just fighting a war, they were committing genocide on a galactic scale. "They're not trying to defeat us," Vorth reported to the hegemony. "High Command, they're trying to erase us from existence. Every world they attack becomes uninhabitable. They're turning the galaxy into a graveyard." The pattern was repeating across hegemony space. Industrial worlds had their atmospheres poisoned. Ocean worlds were contaminated with toxins that would persist for centuries. Even the asteroid mining stations were being destroyed with such thoroughness that the debris fields themselves became hazardous to navigation. Fleet Admiral Zeth convened another emergency session, but this time the Great Hall was only half full. 3 of the member species had already surrendered to the humans, their populations scattered across refugee camps on the few worlds that remained neutral. The once mighty hegemony was collapsing under the weight of human brutality. "We must consider negotiation," the Centaurian representative suggested. "The humans have demonstrated that they can destroy our civilization. Perhaps we can reach some form of accommodation." The suggestion was met with horrified silence. The hegemony had never negotiated with a species they considered inferior. The very idea of surrender to primitive humans was almost incomprehensible. Dr. Williams stood in her laboratory on Luna, surrounded by the components of weapons that would have been unthinkable just years before. The war had transformed not just human society, but human science itself. Research that had once been dedicated to improving life was now focused solely on perfecting methods of destruction. "The quantum virus is ready for deployment," Williams reported to the Joint Chiefs. "It will spread through their communication networks, destroying their ability to coordinate fleet movements. Once deployed, it will take months for them to re-establish contact between their worlds." The virus was humanity's latest innovation in warfare, a self-replicating program that could spread through any quantum communication system. It wouldn't just disrupt enemy communications. It would make their advanced technology turn against them. Commander Blake prepared for what intelligence suggested would be the final phase of the war. His fleet was equipped with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever developed, devices that could destroy entire solar systems if necessary. The mission was simple: find the hegemony's capital world, and demonstrate to their leadership that continued resistance was futile. "We're not going there to negotiate," Blake explained to his officers. "We're going there to show them what happens when you threaten human extinction. By the time we're finished, they'll understand that surrender is their only option." The journey to Nexus Prime took 3 weeks through hyperspace. The human fleet had grown to over 5,000 ships, each one crewed by veterans who had learned to fight without mercy or restraint. These were warriors who had embraced the brutality of total war as a tool of survival. The capital world of the hegemony was a testament to millions of years of galactic civilization. Its cities reached into the clouds, their architecture a blend of styles from dozens of different species. Orbital platforms surrounded the planet like a mechanical constellation, each one a masterpiece of engineering and artistry. Fleet Admiral Zeth watched the approaching human fleet with the resignation of someone who had already accepted defeat. The primitive species that had once begged for acceptance among the stars now commanded a force that could destroy the greatest civilization in the galaxy. All defensive platforms, prepare for engagement, Zeth ordered. We will not surrender without a fight. But the battle that followed was not a fight. It was an execution. The human fleet moved with the precision of a surgical instrument, targeting not just military installations, but the very infrastructure that made life on Nexus Prime possible. Power plants, water treatment facilities, atmospheric processors, everything that sustained the capital world was systematically destroyed. The bombardment lasted for 18 hours. When it ended, the jewel of hegemony civilization was a smoking ruin. The orbital platforms were debris fields. The cities were crater-filled wastelands. The planet that had once been home to billions of beings was now uninhabitable. Commander Blake stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the destruction, with the cold satisfaction of a predator that had cornered its prey. The humans had proven their point with devastating clarity. Broadcast on all frequencies, Blake ordered. Make sure every surviving hegemony world receives this message. The transmission that went out across the galaxy was simple and direct. This is Commander Blake of the Terran Federation. Nexus Prime has fallen, your capital is gone, your fleets are scattered. Your worlds burn at our discretion. You have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally, or we will visit every remaining hegemony world and repeat what you have seen here today. The response came within 6 hours. Fleet Admiral Zeth, broadcasting from a damaged command ship in the outer system, delivered the words that would end the hegemony's reign over the galaxy. To the human forces, we acknowledge your superiority. The hegemony formally surrenders all claims to territory and authority. We request mercy for our civilian populations. But mercy was a concept that humanity had abandoned months ago. The species that had once been known for their compassion had learned that survival required a different approach. The hegemony would surrender, but on human terms. President Rivera's response was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. The hegemony's surrender is accepted. All surviving hegemony military forces will report to designated human facilities for processing. All weapons and military technology will be surrendered immediately. Any attempt to hide military assets will result in the complete sterilization of the offending world. The surrender negotiations took place on the ruins of Nexus Prime. Hegemony representatives, many of them injured survivors of the bombardment, met with human officials in the wreckage of what had once been the galaxy's most beautiful city. Ambassador Phillips represented humanity at the negotiations, her presence a stark reminder of how much had changed since the war began. The woman who had once advocated for peaceful contact with alien species now dictated terms to the remnants of a galactic empire. The terms are non-negotiable, Phillips explained to the assembled alien delegates. All hegemony worlds will be placed under human administration. Your populations will be relocated to designated zones where they can be monitored. Your technology will be studied and adapted for human use. Your species will exist at human discretion. The Deltarian representative, one of the few surviving members of Vorth's original fleet, spoke with the broken voice of someone who had witnessed the end of everything he had believed in. We accept your terms, we have no choice. You have shown us what resistance brings. The final phase of human victory was the most systematic. Across the galaxy, human fleets moved from world to world, implementing the new order with mechanical precision. Hegemony civilians were processed through detention centers where they were evaluated for potential threats. Those deemed safe were allowed to settle in designated areas under human supervision. Those considered dangerous simply disappeared. Dr. Williams oversaw the collection of alien technology from the conquered worlds. The scientific treasures of a dozen civilizations were loaded onto human transport ships and taken to research facilities throughout human space. Technologies that had taken millennia to develop were being absorbed and improved upon within months. We're not just winning this war, Williams reported to the Scientific Council. We're inheriting the accumulated knowledge of the entire galaxy. Every piece of technology, every scientific breakthrough, every innovation, it's all ours now. The transformation of human civilization was complete. The species that had once struggled to establish colonies beyond their home system now controlled resources and territory, spanning thousands of light years. The primitive beings that the hegemony had dismissed were now the undisputed masters of the galaxy. Commander West returned to Earth after overseeing the pacification of the former hegemony core worlds. Her ships carried cargo holds full of alien artifacts and databanks containing the scientific knowledge of extinct civilizations. The war that had begun with humanity fighting for survival had ended with them inheriting an empire. "The resistance is over," West reported to the Joint Chiefs. "The last hegemony holdouts surrendered yesterday. We now control every inhabited system within 50,000 light-years of Earth. The galaxy is ours." But victory came with its own challenges. The human population was struggling to adapt to their new role as galactic overlords. The same species that had once debated the ethics of war crimes was now responsible for governing hundreds of alien worlds, each with their own unique needs and problems. General Park stood before the memorial wall on Luna, reading the names of the human soldiers who had died in the war. Over 2 million names were etched into the black stone, representing the price humanity had paid for galactic dominance. The sacrifice had been enormous, but it had achieved something that would have been unthinkable just years before. The reports from across human space told a consistent story. Alien populations were adapting to their new circumstances with the desperate efficiency of people who had learned the cost of resistance. Former hegemony worlds were being converted to serve human needs. The galaxy's resources were being redirected to support human expansion. War Commander Vorth, now a prisoner in a detention facility on Mars, spent his days writing memoirs that would never be published. His account of the war was a testament to the transformation of both species, the fall of the hegemony and the rise of humanity as a galactic power. "We made a fundamental error," Vorth wrote in his final entry. "We judged humanity by their primitive technology and assumed they were weak. We failed to understand that their greatest weapon was not any machine or energy beam, but their capacity for adaptation. They learned from every defeat, improved with every battle, and ultimately became something more dangerous than any species the galaxy had ever seen. The hunters had indeed become the hunted. The hegemony which had ruled the galaxy through technological superiority and military might had been systematically destroyed by a species they had considered beneath notice. The primitive humans had proven that sometimes the most advanced civilization is simply the one that refuses to accept defeat, the children born on Nu. Geneva had never seen Earth's blue skies. Their playground was the observation deck of a space station orbiting a conquered alien world. Their toys were pieces of hegemony technology that had once powered an interstellar empire. They spoke 3 languages fluently: English, the diplomatic tongue of the galaxy, and the native dialects of whatever species served their families as domestic staff. Ambassador Phillips walked through the corridors of the station that had become humanity's administrative center for the former hegemony territories. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the surface of Kepler 442b, once a thriving Deltarian colony world. Now it housed processing centers where alien refugees waited to learn their fate under human rule. The galaxy had been at peace for 18 months. It was the peace of absolute victory. The silence that followed when one side had been so thoroughly defeated that resistance became impossible. Every star system within 50,000 light-years of Earth flew human flags. Every alien population lived under human authority. The species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians now existed only at human discretion. Status. Report from all sectors, Phillips requested from her aide, a young Andromedan named Vel who had learned to speak English with perfect precision. The alien's tall, graceful form moved with the careful efficiency of someone who understood that their survival depended on pleasing their human masters. All systems report compliance with human administrative directives. Vel responded, his voice carrying the neutral tone that all alien staff had learned to adopt. Food production quotas are being met. Technology transfers are proceeding on schedule. There have been no resistance activities in the past month. The transformation of the galaxy had been swift and thorough. Human administrators governed every world. Human engineers supervised every industrial facility. Human scientists studied every piece of alien technology. The vast empire that the hegemony had built over millions of years had become a human possession in less than 2 years. Dr. Williams stood in her laboratory on the captured research station at Vega 3, surrounded by technological marvels that represented the accumulated knowledge of dozens of civilizations. The quantum computers that lined the walls contained scientific data spanning millions of years. The artifacts on her workbenches included devices that could manipulate matter at the atomic level, faster than light communication systems that operated across galactic distances, and energy sources that could power entire star systems. "We've made remarkable progress," Williams reported to the Scientific Council via holographic link. "The integration of hegemony technology with human innovation has exceeded all projections. We now possess capabilities that place us centuries ahead of where we would have been through natural development. But the scientific advances came with a cost that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The human population was struggling to adapt to their new role as galactic overlords. The same species that had once prided itself on democratic values and individual freedom now ruled over hundreds of billions of alien subjects with absolute authority. President Rivera, now called Supreme Administrator of Terran Space, stood before the Global Council in the rebuilt chamber beneath New Washington. The room was filled with representatives from every human colony, their faces reflecting the complex emotions of a species that had achieved everything they had fought for but wasn't sure what to do with it. "The reports from our administrative zones are consistent," Rivera announced. "Alien populations are adapting to human governance. Production levels are stable. There have been no significant resistance movements for over a year. By every measurable standard, we have achieved total victory." But victory felt different than anyone had expected. The humans who governed alien worlds found themselves isolated from their subjects by an unbridgeable gulf of fear and resentment. The aliens who had once ruled the galaxy now served their former enemies with the desperate efficiency of people who had learned the cost of resistance. Commander Blake, now Admiral of the Third Fleet, patrolled the outer regions of human space, where isolated hegemony holdouts still occasionally attempted to organize resistance movements. His ships were equipped with weapons that could sterilize entire worlds, a reminder to any potential rebels of what defiance would bring. "Contact with unidentified vessels in the Rigel sector," his tactical officer reported. "Configuration suggests former hegemony military vessels." Blake studied the tactical display with the cold interest of a predator evaluating prey. The war had been over for more than a year, but some alien survivors still refused to accept the new reality. They gathered in the empty spaces between systems, forming small fleets that dreamed of somehow restoring their lost empire. "Standard protocol," Blake ordered. "Transmit surrender demands. If they refuse, destroy them." The engagement lasted less than 10 minutes. The alien ships were outdated, their crews were undertrained, and their weapons were no match for human technology. That had been improved with captured hegemony innovations. When the battle ended, there were no survivors to spread word of continued resistance. But each of these encounters left Blake feeling increasingly empty. The enemies he fought now were desperate refugees, not the mighty empire that had once threatened human extinction. The glory of victory had faded, replaced by the mundane work of maintaining an empire built on the bones of extinct civilizations. General Park administered the refugee camps that housed the surviving members of former hegemony species. The facilities were clean, efficient, and utterly devoid of hope. Millions of aliens lived in these camps, waiting for human authorities to decide their ultimate fate. "The psychological profiles are concerning," Dr. Martinez reported during the weekly assessment meeting. "The alien populations show signs of profound depression and learned helplessness. They're not adapting to their new circumstances. They're simply waiting to die." The camps were a constant reminder of what humanity had become. The species that had once championed individual rights and dignity now processed intelligent beings like inventory. The aliens who lived in the camps were fed, housed, and provided with basic medical care, but they were not free in any meaningful sense. War Commander Vorth, now an elderly alien serving as a historical consultant to human researchers, worked in the archives beneath Luna City. His job was to help human scholars understand the complexities of governing the former hegemony territories. He provided detailed analyses of alien cultures, economic systems, and social structures that could help humans maintain control over their subjects. The Deltarian agricultural world in the Tau Ceti system is experiencing unrest, Vorth reported to his human supervisor. The population is struggling to adapt to human dietary requirements. They may require additional oversight. Vorth's voice carried no emotion as he recommended increased surveillance for his own people. The war had broken something fundamental in his spirit, leaving him a hollow shell of the proud warrior who had once commanded fleets. He served his human masters with mechanical efficiency, providing them with information that would help them control his own species more effectively. The transformation was visible throughout human space. Earth itself had become a fortress world, its surface covered with military installations and administrative centers. The planet that had once been a green and blue jewel in space was now gray and industrial, its beauty sacrificed to the demands of empire. The human colonies that had fought desperately for survival just years before were now wealthy beyond imagination. Resources from 100 alien worlds flowed into human space, providing luxuries that previous generations could never have imagined. But the prosperity came with a constant awareness of how it had been achieved. Ambassador Phillips received regular reports from across the galaxy, statistical summaries that reduced the lives of billions of intelligent beings to numbers on a spreadsheet. Population counts, production quotas, resistance incidents. The business of empire was measured in cold data that made it easier to ignore the human cost of galactic dominance. Compliance rates remain high across all sectors, Phillips reported to the Administrative Council. The alien populations understand that cooperation is their only option for survival. We have successfully established human authority throughout the former hegemony territories. But late at night, when the administrative work was finished and the reports were filed, Phillips found herself standing at the observation windows of her station, looking out at the alien world below. She could see the lights of the processing centers where former enemies waited for human authorities to decide their fate. The victory that had seemed so necessary during the war now felt like a burden that humanity would carry forever. Dr. Williams made her final report to the Scientific Council 18 months after the war's end. The integration of alien technology had been completed, giving humanity capabilities that made them the undisputed masters of the galaxy. But the cost of that mastery was becoming impossible to ignore. We have achieved everything we fought for, Williams concluded. We control the galaxy's resources, we possess its accumulated knowledge, and we face no significant military threats. By every objective measure, humanity has won a complete victory. She paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of her colleagues. But we should ask ourselves, what have we become in the process of winning? The species that began this war fighting for survival has transformed into something else entirely. We rule through fear, we govern through force, and we maintain order through the constant threat of annihilation. The silence that followed her words was profound. The humans who had built an empire from the ashes of their enemies were finally beginning to understand the true cost of their victory. They had saved humanity from extinction, but in the process, they had lost something essential about what it meant to be human. President Rivera stood alone in her office that night, looking out at the stars that now belonged to humanity. The galaxy was theirs, but the price of that ownership was a question that would haunt the species for generations to come. They had shown the universe what humans could become when pushed to the edge of extinction. Now they would have to live with the consequences of that transformation forever.